If you've been enjoying this course so far, and if you've had some good first impressions, please consider leaving a review. There should be a link at the top of your screen that says leave a rating. Or if you're on mobile in landscape mode, click the 3 dots at the top. And you can always edit your review later, change the stars, add a comment, so don't worry about that. I know it's still quite early in the course, but I'd love to know what you're thinking of the course so far. How does the lineup of topics sound? How's my presentation style? How's the audio? How's the video? Things like that. Thanks so much. It's story time. What does it really matter if we design totally accessible interfaces or not? Well, this story that I'm going to share with you really answers that question well. I call this story the shutout of inaccessibility. Following a very successful 17-year career as a medical journalist, Dr. Jay Johnson transitioned to academia, where he became a highly respected professor at New Mexico State University teaching journalism. He was a sought-after professor by students because his many years working for major magazines allowed him to give his students the experience of working as a journalist, not just learning about journalism. 3 years into teaching, Jay began to develop vision problems. Gradually, his eyesight became increasingly shadowed. He never had very good peripheral vision to begin with, but this was something more. Being the very busy man that Jay was, he wrote it off as stress or eye fatigue, probably from long hours staring at a bright computer screen every day under the fluorescent lights in his office. However, it got to a point where he couldn't ignore it anymore, so he went in for an eye exam. The optometrist told him that his vision had indeed deteriorated. Jay was referred to an eye specialist to figure out what was going on. After a long wait to get an appointment and then finally to get the results, he was hit with the news like a sack of concrete to the chest. He had an eye disease that was slowly deteriorating his sight. There was no cure, and eventually the disease would take his vision altogether, rendering him blind. His devastation was inexpressible, and his wife, Julie, deeply shared in his grief. It was especially difficult when they had to tell their young daughter and son that before long, Dad would be blind. Jay's career and his passion projects were all spent on a computer. He could not imagine what would become of these projects if he could no longer see his computer screen. No longer pore through albums of photos to pick out the best one for his articles. No longer spend days researching a topic so he could write about it with perfection. But Jay was a very driven man. To say he was a go-getter was an understatement. He continued to use technology for his work, accompanied by assistive technologies like a screen reader, to help him as his sight deteriorated. But to Jay's dismay, he discovered that a lot of websites and applications were not accessible to him because they were poorly designed. Time went on and tragically took Jay's sight, but made him an accessibility expert. He became a strong voice in the technology world, advocating for accessibility. He volunteered to be on committees and boards that worked to improve the accessibility of technology. He used his expertise in writing and journalism to start a blogging website where he highlighted the challenges of people with disabilities, bringing awareness to the ways they lived adapted lives, all to better educate digital product teams, technology companies, and decision makers that digital accessibility matters, and that real people with real limitations are counting on them to do their part. The stories brought to life on his website led to a series of media features recognizing his advocacy work. Jay insisted that he and other people with disabilities not be shut out. He became a leader championing accessibility because leadership was needed. At age 63, Jay was diagnosed with prostate cancer. This time, it wasn't his work on the line, but his life. But Jay was not the kind of man to give up. He planned to research everything about this cancer until he was as proficient as he could be, so he would know his full array of treatment options. However, like so many times before, Jay hit a brick wall. So many of these websites that provided this vital information were not accessible to him. He felt turned away, shut out, and abandoned. He was on the outside, in the dark, with nowhere to turn, all because the website creators didn't care to think about the people with disabilities that would use their sites. Jay was locked out of getting access to vital, life-saving information. He turned to his personal blog, which he used as a way to keep his family and friends up to date with his health journey. One day, when Jay got on his computer and navigated to his personal blog, which was the same blogging platform as his beloved advocacy website, there was a notification. The blogging platform had been updated. Jay proceeded to log in and see what was new, and he quickly found out. His blogging platform was now inaccessible. He would never know what cool new features they added or how slick the redesigned pages were. All he would experience was the feeling of darkness as yet another brick wall of inaccessibility barred him entry. But what stung the most was that this was his blogging platform, a place he felt like was a home. He had spent years lovingly poring over his accessibility website and his personal blog, sharing his biggest victories and deepest struggles. All of that was now gone in the push of a single update. Yet again, he was shut out. Jay had to figure out a way forward. Should he hire someone to move both of his websites to a different platform? Cancer treatments were expensive. He didn't know if he could spend that kind of money. Should he figure out a way to contact the creators of the blogging platform and ask them to please reconsider omitting accessibility? Or would they just tell him that they're fresh out of budget to do another redesign for accessibility since they just did a redesign? If that was the case, he would look into pursuing legal action for discrimination. But would he have the energy to do that amidst his cancer treatments? This is where Jay's story leaves off, because this is the story of his life, and that story is still being written. Technology can be incredibly enabling or disabling. This is why accessibility matters. Anyone can become disabled at any point in their life, even you or someone you love. Most people do not know that designing accessible interfaces is a must-do. It's not an optional add-on, and it benefits people without disabilities too. Accessibility and usability have a lot of overlap, and both provide a better overall experience. The more accessible a digital product is, the more usable it is for everyone. And the more usable a digital product is, the more accessible it will also be. Aspects of this story about Jay, including names, have been fictionalized, but it's based on a very true story of a wonderful person who faced those exact struggles. And Jay was not the only one to face those struggles and the shutout of inaccessibility. There are over 1 billion people with disabilities in the world who face very real and very limiting barriers every day with digital products. But it doesn't have to be that way. With accessible and usable design, we can do our part as designers to design a more inclusive digital world for everyone. Accessibility is essential for some, but useful for all. Another story that was very memorable for me was this one. I'm putting the link to it on this screen, plus in the resources associated with this lecture. This story is from the perspective of a product designer who really didn't want to deal with designing for accessibility. This brief story is the author's personal journey of going from deflecting and trying to push off the responsibility to ultimately discovering what accessibility really is and why he should care. It's a very real and honest story that reveals what goes through so many team members' head when they first hear the words, "We need to design this for accessibility." So check out that story. I think you'll like it. Guess what? We are quickly approaching the end of section 1. You are making fantastic progress. Leading into section 2 and section 3, I want to share that you have a couple of options. First, if you want a bird's eye view of who we're really designing for and in what ways it matters, then continue on to section 2. I recommend this for beginners. It's Accessibility 101, and we talk about the who, what, when, and where of accessibility. Or option number 2, if you want to get right to the design best practices, you can skip section 2. I recommend this for anyone who already knows about accessibility in general. For you guys, I don't want it to feel like it took too long to get into the meat of the course, so I will see you in section 3. For all of the sections in this course, the order in which you complete them doesn't really matter a whole lot. You can skip right to the section that sounds the most beneficial for you, and you can complete that one first. Or you can go through them in sequential order if you're more of a beginner and want to build up to the more advanced topics as we progress. It's completely up to you. All right, you have officially now made it through section 1. You are sailing. Keep up the amazing progress. You've got this. I cannot wait for you to learn all about how to design for accessibility and become an accessible designer. The world needs you. Keep going. You're doing phenomenal.